It's June 18th, 1815. Rolling thunder echoes across a rain-soaked plain in Belgium. The fields are churned into thick mud, and soldiers struggle to steady their footing. Napoleon Bonaparte, the man who once seemed invincible, stands with his army for what will become one of history's most famous battles, the Battle of Waterloo. This is Napoleon's final stand, and the stakes couldn't be higher. Victory means continuing his dream of a European empire, of reclaiming the glory lost after his exile to Elba. Defeat means the end, not just for his ambitions, but for his legend. But how did it all come to this? To understand Waterloo, we must step back 3 months earlier to March 1815. Napoleon had escaped exile from the island of Elba, astonishing everyone. The man Europe thought had been permanently defeated was now marching triumphantly back to Paris. As he made his way across France, his old soldiers flocked to him in droves. They didn't just see a man, they saw a leader, a symbol. In a matter of weeks, Napoleon reclaimed his throne, and with it, his empire. But Europe wasn't about to let him rule unchecked again. The great powers, Britain, Prussia, Austria, and Russia, formed the Seventh Coalition. They weren't just bringing armies, they were bringing the full force of nations determined to crush Napoleon once and for all. Leading the charge were 2 formidable opponents, the Duke of Wellington, commanding the British-led Allied forces, and Field Marshal Blücher, leading the Prussian army. Napoleon, ever the tactician, knew the odds were stacked against him. He had one shot, one brilliant, audacious plan that could shatter the coalition. He would strike before they could fully unite their armies, divide and conquer. If he could defeat Wellington and Blücher separately, France might yet have a chance. On June 15th, Napoleon launched his campaign, catching the Allies off guard. His forces pushed north into Belgium, clashing with the Prussians at Ligny. It was a hard-won victory, but the Prussians managed to retreat in good order. Napoleon believed he had neutralized them, for now. Meanwhile, a second French force under Marshal Ney confronted Wellington's army at Quatre Bras. Again, the outcome was inconclusive, but it forced Wellington to pull back toward a strategic ridge near the village of Waterloo. And it is here, on this ridge, where destiny awaited. The morning of June 18th dawned gray and wet. Heavy rains the night before had soaked the ground, delaying the start of battle. Napoleon, always calculating, knew that the muddy terrain would slow the movement of his troops and artillery. He decided to wait until mid-morning to attack, hoping the ground would dry somewhat. But that delay gave his enemies precious time to organize. At last, the French artillery opened fire. Massive cannonballs tore through the Allied lines, signaling the start of the battle. Waves of French infantry marched toward the ridge, aiming to break Wellington's defense. But the Allied troops, a mix of British, Dutch, Belgian, and German soldiers, held firm under the Duke of Wellington's steady command. Wellington was no stranger to Napoleon's tactics. He knew that holding the ridge was the key to victory, and he would not give an inch without a fight. As the hours dragged on, the battlefield became a scene of sheer chaos, smoke, mud, and blood everywhere. The French launched repeated assaults on key positions like Hougoumont, a fortified farmhouse on the Allied right flank. Though vastly outnumbered, the Allied troops inside Hougoumont held out, repelling wave after wave of French attackers. The fight for Hougoumont became symbolic of the larger battle, a grueling, desperate struggle. Meanwhile, on the French left, a massive cavalry charge thundered across the fields. Thousands of cuirassiers, elite French heavy cavalry, charged again and again against the Allied infantry squares. The ground shook with the force of their gallop, their polished breastplates gleaming even through the smoke. But Wellington's men didn't falter. The infantry squares, armed with muskets and bayonets, were like impenetrable fortresses. Despite incredible bravery, the French cavalry couldn't break through. By mid-afternoon, Napoleon faced a new problem. Blücher's Prussian army was arriving. Despite their earlier defeat at Ligny, the Prussians had regrouped and moved with astonishing speed. They charged onto the battlefield from the east, striking the French right flank. Suddenly, Napoleon was fighting a 2-front battle against both Wellington and Blücher. His plan to divide and conquer had failed, and now he was the one being overwhelmed. Desperation began to set in. As evening approached, Napoleon made one last gamble. He sent in his Imperial Guard, the most feared and elite soldiers in his entire army. These were the veterans of countless campaigns, men who had marched with him from Egypt to Russia. They advanced with unwavering confidence, determined to crush the Allied center and turn the tide of the battle. But this time, the unthinkable happened. The Imperial Guard, Napoleon's invincible force, faltered. Wellington's troops poured musket and cannon fire into their ranks, while fresh reinforcements arrived to bolster the Allied lines. Step by step, the Guard began to fall back. Word spread like wildfire. The Guard is retreating. For Napoleon's army, this was a psychological blow from which they could not recover. As the sun set over Waterloo, the battlefield was littered with the dead and dying. The French army, once so disciplined and proud, was now in full retreat. Napoleon himself fled the field, his dreams of empire shattered. The Battle of Waterloo was over. Napoleon had lost. The Seventh Coalition had triumphed. In the days that followed, Napoleon's enemies closed in. He abdicated the throne once again, this time for good. Unlike his first exile to Elba, there would be no second escape. He was sent to the remote island of St. Helena in the South Atlantic, where he would spend the last 6 years of his life in isolation, far from the Europe he had once dominated. Waterloo was more than just a battle. It was the end of an era. For over a decade, Napoleon had rewritten the rules of Europe, challenging monarchies, reshaping borders, and inspiring both loyalty and fear. But after Waterloo, the old order returned. The Congress of Vienna sought to restore balance and stability, a balance Napoleon's ambitions had disrupted. And yet, Napoleon's legacy didn't fade. His name and his story would become legendary, studied and debated for centuries to come. Even in defeat, he remained larger than life, a man whose rise and fall shaped the course of history. The fields of Waterloo are quiet now, but they hold echoes of that fateful day. They remind us of a leader's ambition, the cost of war, and the moment when one man's quest for glory finally came to an end. This was Waterloo, Napoleon's final stand, a battle for the ages, and a moment that changed the world forever. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe for more content like this.